Alright, this time the Quick Speed Shop, it's another tutorial video. I've got my 1995 Ford F250 behind me. I have a leak at the water inlet where the thermostat goes, and I'm going to try to change the thermostat housing gasket to stop the antifreeze leak I have. But there might be some issues along the way, so if you're doing this repair at home, you're going to want to watch this whole video. I'm a professional, don't try this at home. Okay, let's jump right into it here. We've got a 1995 Ford F250. It's got a 351 5.8 liter fuel injected Windsor engine. Got my upper radiator hose, and if you can see down in here, I've got antifreeze laying on the timing cover, and the bottom of this water outlet for the upper hose, or water inlet I should say, for the upper hose is leaking. There is 2 bolts and 2 hose connections to it. First thing we got to do is take the radiator cap off. The engine is cool here. You got to make sure your engine is cool. Okay, the first thing we're going to do here is remove the radiator cap. I've already loosened it. The engine is cool. And as you can see here, the engine radiator is full of antifreeze. I'm going to want to drain the level antifreeze down below the top of the water jackets in the engine here. There's water in the throttle body, and there's water in the top of the engine up to this hose. So I'm going to drain about half the capacity of the radiator just by using the drain cock on the bottom of the radiator with a pan. This is newer coolant, so I'm going to keep it. If you have coolant that has 20-30,000 miles on it, you might want to think about flushing your system and putting new coolant in it. But this coolant has only got a few thousand miles on it, so I'm going to reuse this. So we'll drain the radiator first, and then we'll remove this upper hose and remove the hose and a water neck, and we're going to try to get these 2 bolts out. And you want to be careful because these can break off in the intake manifold. Okay, under the truck here on the passenger side, there is a drain cock here. You loosen that up, and there's a little spout on the side you can stick a 3/8 rubber hose on to direct your coolant flow. So I'm going to do that so it doesn't just go all over the place. Okay, I've hooked my hose up to the radiator, and I've got this drain pan that captures the coolant well, so I'll go ahead and I'll crack that, and it should start to bleed down into here. There you can see that controls the flow of the antifreeze very nicely. You don't get it all over the place. So I'll just let this drain down for a few minutes until I get below, probably about halfway down. Oh, got a little leak out of the valve there. So I'll just drain this down for a little bit, and then we'll tackle working on the water neck. While that's draining, I'm going to remove this upper intake hose to get it out of the way so we got some room to work. You also notice that on my upper radiator hose, I've got a metal guard on this. I actually made this out of a piece of mandrel bent tubing. And this is just a tip for you. This upper radiator hose is very, very close to the serpentine belt. And you can see down there, there's a little mark on there where the steel actually touched the belt once in a while. When this gets hot, this hose tends to want to lay down, and it can rub through. You actually see a little bit of wear there. It can rub through your upper radiator hose and leave you stranded. So some of the hoses come with a plastic guard on them. This one didn't. So I made this exhaust tubing bend and just slid that right through the hose, and it's protected this hose for 20,000 miles. It's kept it good, and you can see that it's definitely needed it because it was touching this belt once in a great while. So that's just a little tip for you, free tip, when you're working on trucks like this. Okay, I went and I removed the air inlet hose so we can get here the intake hose. As you can see here on the water neck, it looks like maybe this hose is leaking. So I'm going to go ahead and take this hose off now. I think we got enough down where I can do that. But maybe there's corrosion under this water neck and it's causing a leak here, because that definitely looks like water is running down out of this hose. This clamp didn't seem very tight there. You know what? There's actually a little bit of a corrosion on that water neck in this hose. It could have been leaking out of this hose, and a combination of the loose clamp and corrosion could have been letting it drip just a little bit of antifreeze out of there. There's actually corrosion right here on this housing, and I bet that's what's making this leak. That hose is not fitting correctly on here. I can feel a lot of corrosion because of that. But I would still like to replace this gasket since I'm not 100% sure. that is the problem, I still want to replace this gasket. So I've got two bolts hold this on. I've got this hose that goes from the water neck to the water pump. I got to remove that. And if these hoses are old, I've replaced this when I redid the water pump in this engine. But if your hoses look like they're old at all, you want to replace them. I believe this is 5/8. I believe it's 5/8 heater hose. Okay, on further inspection, my interconnect hose here has some splitting at the top. I'm going to go ahead and replace this with a new piece of 5/8 hose. It's actually like 3/4 on the upper end, and I used a piece of 5/8 hose I jammed down there, and it stressed that a little bit. I don't know if you can get this replacement hose like from Rock Auto, but I'm going to have to go ahead and make it out of 5/8 hose again. The problem I've run to now is these bolts are both stuck in here. I put a ratchet on them. They're very small threads. I think they're 5/16. And I don't want to snap them off in the water neck, and I tried putting a little force on them with a ratchet. The problem is these are steel bolts, and the intake manifold is aluminum, and they corrode in there. And I do not want to snap these off. So what I'm going to do is, you guys might not have one of these at home, but I've got a acetylene torch. I'm going to put some heat on the manifold and see if I can bust these guys loose without snapping them off, because we'll be in a world of hurt if I do. So let me get that out, and we'll put a little localized heat here. And this one's going to be really hard because it's got hoses and electrical connections. I'm going to try to put some heat on it and see how we do. Heat the intake manifold up. There's a lot of fire in here. Gotta be careful, or you'll set the gaskets on fire. Oh boy. You gotta go fast with it here so I don't set everything on fire. There we go, there's one. Hopefully I didn't damage any other gaskets on there. There, we got that one. The upper one's going to be even trickier because I've got, get this harness out of the way. Whew, got it. Man. Now honestly, this isn't really a backyard repair if you don't have a torch. Maybe you could get like a Burns-O-Matic in there to do it. You see, I did a little bit of damage here. I kind of, hopefully the front of this intake manifold gasket's not too burned, and luckily there was some antifreeze on there to keep the flames a minimum. But I've got it loose. I'm going to let this cool down before I touch it. Obviously, because it's very warm, you saw it boiling the coolant, but I've got both bolts loose. When I put them back in here, I'm going to use anti-seize on these to go in the aluminum housing. That's pretty much the only way you can get this out without snapping those bolts off, is put some heat on it. It's Really bad idea. I mean, obviously I know why car companies use steel bolts on aluminum, because they don't care, because they put it together at the factory and it's down the road. But years later with corrosion, there's no way to get those bolts out without putting heat on it. So I got them out. When this cools down, we'll pop the thermostat housing off, take a look at that. I'll put a new gasket on it, get some new hose, and hopefully I didn't do any damage, and my leak, I can fix my leak and get this thing back on the road. Okay, I waited for it to cool down. I took the two bolts out. The water neck fell off and the thermostat fell out because it's vertical here. But I got them up here on the core support. You can see the gasket was pretty much wasted for this thermostat. This part faces out. It was pretty shot, so it could have been leaking. This is a nice one. It's 180, I believe, with the BB at the top. It allows water to go through. And you can see on the bolts, the amount of corrosion that was on the threads there, that was pretty much stuck in this water neck. And it's cooled down a little bit. Let's take a look at the back. It's actually not really corroded that bad. It's better than I thought it was going to be. But you can see here on the right there where the hose goes, there was corrosion that needs to be cleaned off there, so it could have been leaking from that. But we're going to go ahead and do it all right now. So we got to get a razor blade. I'm going to stick a rag in the hole so I don't get a bunch of crap in the intake manifold. I'm just going to scrape all this gasket off, right click, clean it up, sop up all this antifreeze on the timing cover, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm going to try clean the front of this up with a little wire wheel here on my drill, just to shine up the aluminum if I can get in here. This will make this nice and smooth and ready for gasket action. Okay, you don't want to leave your rag in the intake manifold. That would be a bummer. Okay, I got the water neck all cleaned up. I used the wire wheel on my grinder, and I shined it all up real nice. I actually filed and cleaned up the parting lines when this is cast. It had a little ridge there. It'll help that seal a little bit better. But I got all the surfaces cleaned up. Now, this is tricky. This housing, you got to glue the thermostat into the housing, and it can't fall out. So my original thermostat is good. It's a 192 degree, not 180. It's 192 as a factory thermostat. I'm going to reuse it because it's a good quality one with this bleed hole in it. And I didn't order one by accident when I went to do this job, so I'm going to reuse this, but it works fine. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this in here. I'm going to use some of this high-tech gasket sealer by Permatex to hold the thermostat into the water neck. And then I've got a Felpro gasket that I'm going to glue down. Let's see, how does it go? Like this. I'm going to just use a fine little bit of RTV here, gray RTV, just because if you look here, this sealing surface is super small in this thing, and I want to make sure I got a good seal without any leaks. So I'm just going to use just a very little bit of RTV under this gasket to help glue this down. Usually on paper gaskets, I would just strictly use this Permatex gasket maker. But like I said, I just want to make sure I get a little bit more action with the gasket, just because the sealing surface looks like it's so small on the water neck. So I'm just going to take this. This will help just glue this thermostat down to the housing very, very lightly. Make sure you get it the right way. The plunger goes towards the block. I got my air bleed is up there like that. Then I'm simply going to take the RTV, just put a little bit on the sealing surface here to make up the gasket. Just going to lightly cover the gasket surface. And this will seal very nicely out any water leaks and help glue this gasket down very nice. I'll take the gasket, make sure my thermostat is seated. I'm just going to let this tack up for a few minutes on here. that it'll tack up nice, and then I'll just put a very slight film on the gasket when I put it in the engine. And in the meantime, I'm going to make a new heater hose, and then we'll be ready to reassemble this. Okay, it's ready to reassemble here. I went and I put some anti-seize on the bolts, and I ran them in the holes once to get anti-seize in the threads. And I've got a little bit of RTV on my gasket, so I'm just going to go ahead and bolt this right back into place. Okay, there we go. It's just that easy. I'm going to make my new hose and put it on here. Then I'm going to reassemble this and fill the coolant up. But my repair should be complete. I've cleaned all the surfaces that had corrosion. I'm just going to use a little bit of axle grease and just put a slight film on this aluminum to prevent corrosion in the future between the hose and the aluminum itself. I've got my new gasket. I've got a very, very slight layer of RTV on the gasket holding the thermostat and to the manifold. Anti-seize in my bolts. I've cleaned up all the corrosion on all the fittings. It's just time to reassemble it, and the repair should be complete. So you can go ahead and just put the truck back together in the reverse order that you took it apart. I'm going to wait a couple hours for this RTV to set up before I put the antifreeze back in the engine. But I'll go ahead and I'll put all my hoses back on and get ready for the antifreeze fill. Now, one trick I have here for that, since a lot of water came out of the engine, and this throttle body is water cooled, you can remove your upper hose here, take it off and just leave it as a vent, and then when you add your coolant back to the radiator, it'll push all the air out of the top of the engine. You won't have any airbound issues with your engine. Once you see coolant start to come out of this upper hose, you can just stick it back on the throttle body. You'll make sure you got all the air out of the engine, as this is the highest point. So there's one more trick for you. I got to go ahead and plug this back in, but I'll get all my hoses on. You can see that was a pretty involved repair with the torch for just something so simple as fixing the gasket. If you get to this point on your truck and you don't have the correct tools like the torch or any way to, don't break the bolts off in the manifold, you'll be there hours trying to fix that. Take it to somebody or have somebody come over that's got a torch so they can heat that up for you, or get like one of those thermal inductor tools. I did a video on one a while ago that'll heat up the bolt and a lot of bolts come out. The last thing you want to do is break the bolts off. That's why, even though I had a lot of fire on there and it was a little dangerous for the engine, I had to get those bolts out without breaking them off due to the metal, the similar metal corrosion. So I got the repair done. Hopefully this will keep your F-Series Ford truck on the road, and we'll see you again in the next video from the Quick Speed Shop.